In May 1999, a 13-year-old girl entered a Hong Kong police station with an unusual problem. She was being haunted. Albeit, this wasn't your typical paranormal case of windows slamming shut on their own, books flying off of shelves, or shadows darting down halls. No, this teen's haunting pertained only to her dreams and only to one ghost. A blood-stained woman bound in electrical wire was the recurring guest in these nightly visits. And when it came to what the ghost wanted from the teen, well, she only had one request. She'd like her head back. A spooky story, sure, but not one that concerned law enforcement, at least not initially.
Obviously, they didn't think much of it, but then she told them that she had a hand in the torturing and the murder of that woman.
Yes, according to the girl, these bad dreams weren't the creative works of her subconscious, but memories of the evils she saw, the evils she had once so casually partaken in. And from her perspective, there was only one way to silence the ghost's endless cries: confess. The officers weren't convinced this wasn't the tall tale of a bored or possibly mentally ill teenage girl. Still, what harm would it do to follow up on the story?
They followed the girl back to a flat in a rundown part of the city in Hong Kong.
Specifically, law enforcement had been taken to an apartment building on 31 Granville Road in the Jim Sa Dui district of Kowloon, an area that, at the time, was known to be frequented by unsavory characters. And when the officers opened the door to the third-floor flat, they were certainly in for a surprise. The unit's 7 rooms were entirely decked out in Hello Kitty merch, from bedsheets to curtains, towels, kitchenware, and toys. That's when they saw it. The stuffed animal the 13-year-old had told them to look for, a Hello Kitty mermaid. As for what they found inside the toy, well, suddenly, the teenager's ghost story didn't sound so far-fetched after all. But before we get to what law enforcement discovered, let's discuss the history of the woman that this case would come to center on. Fan Man-yee, born in Shenzhen, China in 1976. When it came to life, Fan had a rocky start. As a child, she was abandoned by her parents and left to be raised in an orphanage, which too had released Fan from its care by the time she turned 15. So, with no family and no shelter, the teen took to the streets, where she soon became involved in illegal substances and selling her body as a way to support this habit. And for Fan, even life's brightest points were subject to overcast. Take, for example, in 1996, when she met En Chi-wen at a karaoke club, a man that would become her common-law husband. Well, any hope of a happily ever after for the two quickly dissolved after her husband, who also suffered from addiction, began physically mistreating her, according to reports. Still, the birth of their first child, a baby boy, in March 1998, was enough for Fan to try to make a better life for her family. She took up work as a hostess at a nightclub, a business that some online sources would later refer to as a brothel. Regardless of what the establishment was or wasn't, it drew a bad crowd, a portion of which included members of the Chinese mafia, aka the Triads. See, in the 1990s, Hong Kong was experiencing a wave in gang violence, with Triad members making the city their playground through armed robberies, kidnappings, and further crimes that were glamorized by the Hong Kong film industry and culture of the time. And there was one Triad member in particular that frequented Fan's work, a 34-year-old man by the name of Chen Menlo. Chan was a dealer and a pimp, and it wasn't long before Fan fell into the pits of his inner circle where everything was fine, until one day when suddenly it wasn't. According to some sources, Fan was still in the throes of addiction. According to others, her grandmother's medical bills were piling up. Either way, she needed money. And Chan? Well, he was brimming with cash. So, in a moment of desperation, Fan decided to pocket 4,000 Hong Kong dollars from his wallet, a decision that would have devastating consequences. After all, it didn't take long for Chan to figure out his money was missing and who had stolen it. So he asked for it back, but with interest.
Fan Man-yee returned the stolen money immediately and begged for additional time to gather the interest payment.
Unfortunately for Fan, Chan wasn't a patient man and hatched his own scheme to ensure he was given what he believed he was owed. So, on March 17, 1999, Fan was abducted by two of Chan's lackeys, Luang Xingzhu and Liang Wailun, and taken to Chan's hideout. You know, that Hello Kitty-adorned apartment on Granville Road, a location that Fan wouldn't leave alive. See, while Chan's alleged intent was to force Fan into adult work to pay off her debt, under the influence of mind-altering substances and a seeming lack of conscience, the purpose of this kidnapping quickly morphed into something even darker. At least, that's according to the account of one key witness. As for who this source was, remember that teen who visited the police station to report a haunting? Well, it turned out she was one of the many young impressionable girls that became involved with members of the triad, only to become hooked on illegal substances. The 13-year-old runaway, who would come to be known under the pseudonym of Ah Fong, was a girlfriend of Chan's, although that title likely referred to performing adult work for the triad member. And her time at 31 Granville Road meant she also became familiar with Chan's captive and what he and his henchmen were allegedly doing to her. With the outside windows covered with planks of wood to hide the atrocities they were committing, Ah Fong bore witness as Fan was allegedly essayed and harmed with brute force, household objects, lighters, and spices to make the incident all the more excruciating for the prisoner.
Everything had gotten all the way out of hand.
Fan was even allegedly made to put on a happy face during this treatment, unless she wanted the torment to worsen.
They forced her to smile through the abuse and say she enjoyed it.
Afterwards, the group would allegedly decompress by playing video games in the next room, as Fan sat with her hands tied above her head to stop her from picking at her wounds. Of course, Ah Fong was far from an innocent bystander. No, according to what the 13-year-old would tell police, she would often join in, and so together, the four purportedly continued to debase, humiliate, and harm Fan in ways that don't bear repeating.
Any horrible things you can think of, she went through it in this month.
The things that these three men did to her are just absolutely horrific.
She just suffered beyond, comprehension.
And when their captive was too weak to stand the torment any longer, well, they allegedly suspended her from the ceiling to make inflicting pain on her all the easier. However, the human body can only take so much, and when the group returned from a night out on April 15th, they found Fan had passed away at just 23 years old. Soon after this, law enforcement paid a visit to the apartment building, and while the cause of their appearance had nothing to do with Chan's unit, it was enough to send the triad members into a panic. They had to get rid of Fan fast. And as if their captive hadn't allegedly been demeaned enough through the past month, when it came to laying her to rest, well, it was clear the group hadn't suddenly developed a sense of right or wrong. They placed Fan in the bathtub and over 10 hours dismembered her body while placing her muscles in a refrigerator. Then, likely in an effort to hide the scent of decomposition, parts of the remains were boiled, including her head. In fact, as they boiled the skull, they were reportedly simultaneously cooking noodles on another burner, using the same spoon for both pots. "Oh, please don't be so depressed," Chan allegedly said when he removed Fan's skull from the pot. "I will help you look good. Don't move. I'll help you dress up." And dress Fan up they did.
What happened next and the way these people disposed of her body is unfortunately where this hideous crime gets its sweet, cute name.
Yes. As the officer that tore into the Hello Kitty mermaid doll a month later would discover, there, sewn into the stuffed animal, was Fan's head. Further remains of Fan were discovered scattered throughout the filthy apartment, including a single tooth next to the Hello Kitty doll, 3 bags of body parts left in different areas, and a plastic bag of internal organs found dumped on the canopy of the apartment building. As for the rest of Fan's remains, the group allegedly donated them to a refused collection where they went missing amongst trash. On May 30th, 1999, Chan Man-lao, Luang Xingzhu were arrested. However, the third accomplice, Liang Wailun, made a run for it, fleeing to mainland China, It wasn't until March 31st of the following year he was brought back to Hong Kong to face charges. And so, on October 20th of 2000, the trial began. While 2 of the 3 of the defendants pleaded guilty to unlawful imprisonment, excluding Lang Xing-chu, who denied this charge, all 3 pleaded innocent when it came to manslaughter. According to their defense, Fan had passed not as a result of torment, but due to an overdose. However, this claim to innocence didn't stop Chan Man-lo, Luang Xing-zu, and Luang Wai-lun from accusing each other of harming Fan over the 6-week trial. But where was their 4th comrade in crime, the now 15-year-old Ah Fong? Well, in exchange for agreeing to testify against the 3 men, the teen was given immunity for her involvement. However, during her testimony, she did offer an explanation for her participation, which came down to curiosity and amusement. But Ah Fong wasn't the only person who offered information that contradicted the defendant's version of events. A psychiatrist testified that Fan's captors had been utterly remorseless for their actions. And Fan's common-law husband, En Ching-wen, who had last seen Fan days before she went missing when she came to visit him at an addiction treatment center, claimed his wife had stopped taking illegal substances after learning she was pregnant with their son. However, Fan wasn't the only one who had a partner in the courtroom. Chan Man-lo's common-law wife, Chang Ga-boy, who was pregnant with their 2nd son at the time, when Fan's life was taken, was present for almost every day of the trial. "I never imagined she had been so severely harmed," she told the South China Morning Post. But when asked whether she would tell her children what their father had allegedly done to Fan, she hesitated. "I dare not think about this. I would need to discuss this with my husband. This is something for him and not me to decide," she said. As the trial drew to a close, it became apparent to the public that however compelling the testimony was, and however untrustworthy were the abductors, it was impossible to prove whether Fan's life was taken or the result of an overdose due to the state her remains were found in. But that didn't mean her captors were innocent. No. While the intent to take Fan's life hadn't been sufficiently proven, the jury was in agreement that the imprisonment these men put Fan through was certainly the cause. So, on November 21st, 2000, Chan Man-lo, Luang Xing-zu, and Luang Wai-lun were found guilty of manslaughter, unlawful imprisonment, and preventing a lawful burial. And due to what Judge Peter Naijin referred to as the group's psychopathic tendencies, they were given the maximum sentence of manslaughter, life in prison with the possibility of parole in 20 years. The 3 men stood, expressionless as their sentence was delivered. Never in Hong Kong in recent years has a court heard of such cruelty, depravity, callousness, brutality, violence, and viciousness, the judge told the men. Even an animal would not have been maltreated in the same way as that received by the deceased. The public is entitled to protection from people such as you, but for those who were close to Fan, the verdict was a hollow victory. "I don't know whether I'm happy or unhappy," Fan's widowed partner, En Ching-wen, said after the sentencing. "But for now, I can put my mind at ease. For the crime they committed, they deserve to be sentenced to serve the rest of their lives in jail." He was undecided on whether to tell their now 2-year-old son, who was at the time in custody of social services, what happened. And while it's since been rumored that a necklace Fan wore was handed over to her son, who wears it to this day, due to a lack of credible sources, that claim remains unsubstantiated. There has, however, been an update on one of Fan's captors. After all, 2020 has come and gone, as has Chan Man-lo, Luang Xing-zu, and Luang Wai-lun's chance at parole.
I haven't found any reports that showed they got paroled. I really hope they weren't.
And while it's true there's been no word on whether Chan Man-lo and Luang Wai-lun were released, the same cannot be said for Luang Xing-zu. See, in 2004, the accomplice's conviction was overturned after it was found that the judge had misdirected the jury when summoning him, leading to a retrial. At this time, in exchange for a guilty plea, his sentence was reduced to just 18 years. He accepts the crime he took part in was totally horrendous. He is not the man he was. He is a reformed person, his lawyer, Richard Donnell, promised the judge. However, it appeared the attorney was gravely mistaken when it came to his client. Freed in 2011, by 2022, the 48-year-old was already charged with another crime, essaying his friend's young daughter. He was sentenced to 12 months in jail, meaning by now, he may have already been released. Naturally, this seemingly lax treatment of the convict angered the internet. Grievances one Reddit user summarized, writing, "People like this never change. Life in prison should mean just that." As for the Hong Kong triads these men belong to, they still operate in the city today, on a smaller scale. I don't think they'll ever go away. Former Chief Superintendent Barry Smith told the South China Morning Post in 2019, "They're a part of Hong Kong fabric." So too has Fan Man-yee's story become ingrained in the city's fabric. The gory details, the seedy characters, and the unfathomable use of a beloved childhood figure both fascinated and disturbed citizens of the safe city. That kind of thing, you think, okay, it happens every day in New York, or maybe on the mainland, Hong Kong stylist Irene Chan told the Washington Post, but not in Hong Kong, so people can't help it. They want to know. Eventually, this interest led to 2 films based on the subject, one titled Human Pork Chop, and the other, There is a Secret in My Soup. These depictions of the crime have been widely critiqued, including by Hong Kong Hello Kitty distributor Sanrio, that accused the films of turning tragic real-life events into entertainment for the masses. But it wasn't just that crime that captivated the city, but the ghost story. See, after reports of the lights flickering during the trial, and the story of defendant Leong Sing Zhu allegedly telling detention center guards that every woman he saw in the courtroom looked like Fan Man-yee, the victim's restless spirit gained notoriety. Rumors spread that those who rented flats in the building where Fan's life was taken could hear a woman crying at night and see ghostly apparitions in the halls. On the show, Speaker for the Dead, allegedly, the girl who reported the case, supposedly Ah Fong, received a knock on her door one night from a person who told her, "Thank you." And in the months following Fan's passing, CCTV cameras reportedly captured the shadowy figure of a woman lingering in shops in Sim Sha Tsui after hours. Regardless of whether this was a true haunting or not, the Granville apartment became known as a hongza, which in Cantonese refers to a haunted house where a life was taken through unnatural means, such as by the victim's own hand or someone else's. And it wasn't long before the 3rd floor of the building was entirely vacated and, subsequently, gutted, in an attempt to erase the dark history, save for a note from April 1999, the month Fan lost her life, that remained on the door of Chan's abandoned flat, reading, "Dear tenant, please put the domestic waste at the stairs of the back exit. Thank you for your cooperation. Yours truly, the landlord." However, 31 Granville Road's hongza reputation also made it a good real estate investment due to the low price. So, by 2012, the apartment was torn down to begin the construction of something new in its place, a hotel. However, since the accommodation opened in 2016, there's been strange reports of a young woman wandering the halls. For those who know her face, her identity is unmistakable. She's the ghost of Fan Man-yee. Fan Man-yee is one of those cases that sticks with people as a lesson in human depravity and the dark deeds that those who walk among us are capable of.
This has got to be one of the most horrific I've ever come across.
But more than that, it's the suffering Fan allegedly went through over her last month that makes this crime hard to stomach.
What Fan Man-yee had to endure in the month that she spent being held captive in that apartment is up there with some of the worst things I have ever heard.
And the fact that one of her captors was welcomed back into society and the others might soon join him, well, that's what keeps this case alive.
Does anyone know if these men are free on the streets? Because I can't find any information on it.
This is the story of Fan Man-yee, the ghost story, the victim, and the mother who lives on in public memory as all 3.